In the spring of 2014, a video spread across Ukraine. A single armored vehicle, a BMP, draped in a blue and yellow flag. It accelerates, and it drives straight through a Russian roadblock. No hesitation, it just goes. The city was Mariupol, then under Russian occupation. And the man behind the wheel earned a nickname that stuck for a decade. They called him the Flying BMP. Last week, that same man took command of Ukraine's entire armed forces. His name is Mykhailo Drapatyi. He is 43 years old, and President Volodymyr Zelenskyy handed him a vast wartime military at the hardest moment of the war. But here's what makes this worth your time. Zelenskyy did not choose him freely. He chose him because the streets demanded it. And the General Drapatyi replaced defended Kiev itself in 2022. So today we ask one simple question. Can a single commander change a war? You're listening to the Veritas Brief from Veritas Europaea. We are a reader-funded, advertising-free publication. We cover the political economy of Europe, finance, power, and security, slowly and in-depth. We don't chase the news cycle, we try to explain it. Today we go inside Ukraine's most dramatic leadership shakeup of the war. We'll meet the reformer at the top. We'll follow the protests that put him there. And we'll ask what he can actually change, and what no single general can fix. Let's begin where the crisis began. Not on the battlefield, but in a government reshuffle. It started quietly, as these things often do. In mid-July, Prime Minister Yulia Svyridenko resigned. She stepped down at the president's request, and under Ukraine's rules, that one move dissolved the entire government. Every minister had to be reappointed. Most were, but one man was not. His name is Mykhailo Fedorov, and to understand the storm that followed, you have to understand who he is. Fedorov was Ukraine's digital minister, and then its defense minister. He built his whole career on a single idea. Technology, moving fast, could beat a much larger enemy. Drones, software, data. He was the face of the modern war. So when the reshuffle quietly dropped him, the reaction was anything but quiet. Within hours, senior officers began to resign in protest. Colonel Pavlo Yelizarov, a top Air Force commander, walked out. He called Fedorov's removal a great evil for the country's defense capability. Fedorov's own drone advisor quit the same day. Then, the public joined in. Protests broke out in more than a dozen cities. People carried signs with a blunt message. One read, "Removing Fedorov equals helping the Russians." Another read, "Don't change what works, change for the better." These grew into the largest demonstrations since Russia's full-scale invasion. A war-weary nation, out in the squares, defending a technocrat to protect an idea. And the crowds did something the government did not expect. They widened their demand. Because one detail spread with the story. The man who helped push Fedorov out was the Commander-in-Chief himself, General Oleksandr Syrskyi. So the protesters added a second name to their chants. They wanted Syrskyi gone too. Here we reach the real fault line. This was never only about two men, it was about two visions of how Ukraine fights. On one side, Fedorov, the modernizer. Move fast, iterate, trust the technology. On the other, Syrskyi, a Soviet-trained general who ran the war through a rigid chain of command. Fedorov did not hide the conflict. He said his reforms had a wall of resistance, and he put it in the sharpest terms. Instead of thinking about how to defeat Russia asymmetrically, he said, the commander figured out how to split the country. The public sided with the minister. An independent poll, taken as the crisis broke, found more than 60% opposed Fedorov's removal. Nearly half believed it would weaken Ukraine's defense. So Zelenskyy faced the gravest domestic crisis of his wartime presidency, and he made his choice. He let the general go. And he reached for the one commander the crowds were already chanting for. So who is Mykhailo Drapatyi? We've told you about the BMP in Mariupol, but that video is not why soldiers trust him. It points to something deeper. Drapatyi is a career tank officer, more than 2 decades in uniform. He graduated top of his class at Ukraine's National Defense University. Britain's ambassador handed him a ceremonial sword for it. By every account, he is one of the finest battlefield commanders of his generation. But his real reputation rests on one rare quality. He takes responsibility. In public, even when it costs him. Consider the summer of 2024. Russia pushed hard toward Kharkiv. Drapatyi helped stop that push. And Zelenskyy rewarded him. He became the youngest ever commander of Ukraine's ground forces. Then came the test that defined him. He inherited a brand new unit, the 155th Brigade. France had trained it and armed it. It was meant to be a showcase. Instead, it suffered mass desertions before it even fully deployed. An embarrassment. Drapatyi could have blamed the French. He did not. He blamed Ukraine's own recruitment and training. He turned the failure inward, and he pushed for reform. And then, tragedy. A Russian Iskander missile struck a training ground in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. 12 soldiers died. More than 60 were wounded. Killed far behind the front, waiting. Drapatyi did not hide behind a report. He resigned. And he said something Ukrainian soldiers still repeat. An army where no one is responsible for the losses, he said, is dying from within. Here's the twist. Zelenskyy refused the resignation. He would not let Drapatyi leave. He moved him instead to a frontline command, the Joint Forces. And there, units under Drapatyi retook ground around Kupiansk. 6 months later, the crowds were chanting his name. And now, he holds the top job. Before we go on, we want to be fair to the man he replaced. History deserves that. Oleksandr Syrskyi is not a villain. He organized the defense of Kiev in 2022. He drove the stunning Kharkiv counteroffensive. He launched the audacious raid into Russia's Kursk region. Those are real achievements, historic ones. His critics faulted his methods, a top-down culture, and the brutal cost of holding Bakhmut. But even Syrskyi rejected the idea that he ignored technology. He built Ukraine's dedicated drone branch himself. Leadership changes rarely have clean heroes and villains. Hold that thought. Let's pause for a moment. You'll notice this podcast has no sponsor. No mattress company, no mid-roll for a meal kit. That's on purpose. Veritas Europaea is funded by one group of people. Our readers. Our listeners. You. Everything we publish is free to read. No paywall, no gate. We believe analysis like this should reach anyone who needs it, not only those who can pay. But independent journalism still costs something to make. The reporting, the reading, the hours spent getting it right. That work runs on patronage. Not advertisers, not a billionaire owner, patrons. So here's our ask, and it's simple. If this is the kind of work you want in the world, join us. The first step is free. Go to veritaseuropaea.eu and sign up with your email. That's it. You'll get every piece we publish in your inbox before anyone else. And if you're able to go further, become a paying member. Not for perks, for independence. Your support is what keeps these words free of an advertiser's agenda, and free for the next reader who can't afford to pay. That's veritaseuropaea.eu. Sign up. Stay independent with us. Now, back to the war. We said this fight was about two visions. Now let's make that concrete. Because the whole argument comes down to one weapon and one number. The weapon is the FPV drone. First-person view. A small, cheap aircraft flown by an operator in a headset. It streams live video, and the operator steers it onto a target. Each one costs a few $100s. And it does work that used to need artillery. Now the number. When Russia invaded in 2022, Ukraine's workshops made a few thousand of these drones. A few thousand. In a whole year. By 2025, that figure had reached roughly 4.5 million. Let that land. From a few thousand to millions in under 4 years. And by early 2026, Ukraine's capacity had climbed toward 8 million a year. The country now builds the parts itself, the boards, the motors, the antennas, in basements and small workshops to cut its reliance on China. Scale has become a survival strategy, and this is the heart of the matter. A war fought with millions of cheap, fast-evolving drones rewards exactly what Fedorov demanded: speed, iteration, and decisions pushed down to the people at the front. That is the world Drapatyi comes from. He didn't read about this shift in a briefing. He watched it reshape his own sectors in real time. So his appointment is not just about one man. Inside Ukraine's defense community, People read it as a victory for the modernizers, the whole movement Fedorov came to embody. The reform agenda survives, even without the minister who championed it. But we promised you honesty, so here it is. Drapatyi inherits problems that no reputation can fix by itself. Start with structure. In early 2025, Ukraine began a major reform, the corps system. For most of the war, brigades fought under temporary, overlapping commands. Those commands often took no real responsibility for the units beneath them. It was, in the analysts' words, organizational improvisation. The fix was permanent corps. Each one controls 5 to 7 brigades, each fields 60 to 80,000 troops. By early 2026, Ukraine had formed 18 of them. On paper, it brings the army closer to NATO. In practice, it's been messy. Brigades still fight outside their assigned corps. Some corps work beautifully. Others failed so badly that their commanders were dismissed. The reform is half-built and fragile, and Drapatyi has to finish it during a war. Then there's the problem beneath the problem: resources. Under Syrskyi, the elite assault units got priority. They drew a large share of fresh troops. They reported straight to the top. Meanwhile, the weaker defensive brigades were left thin. In one southern region, undermanned units retreated again and again, and Russia turned a quiet sector into a genuine threat. The strange result: Ukraine retaking villages in one place, while its lines buckled in another. Drapatyi has to rebalance that. He has to feed the defense without starving the offense. And we'll be honest, there is no easy answer. Every soldier you send one way leaves a gap the other way. And all of this happens under fire. The front gives no pause. Russia captured the cities of Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad in early 2026. Its summer offensive grinds on. Ukraine's general staff logs hundreds of clashes every single day. Yet Russia struggles to turn those gains into a breakthrough. It has barely moved west of Pokrovsk since December. Its recruitment strains under heavy losses, and Ukrainian drones now strike deep, hitting the oil refineries that fund the war. But Ukraine carries its own deep wound: manpower. Its best brigades cannot replace their infantry fast enough, and no reform of the command structure fixes that shortage. Drapatyi will lead tired troops and thin reserves. So what do the people who study this expect? The mood among analysts is cautious hope. The retired colonel, Oleksandr, called the appointment a reset. This is a second chance, he said, for the armed forces of Ukraine to truly carry out reforms. Others looked past structures to people. The military expert Ivan Stupak named personnel as the first priority. Without a strong team, he warned, even the best leader will be unable to change anything. He wants abusive commanders removed, and where warranted, held to account. The political analyst Volodymyr Fesenko judged the choice sound. Mykhailo Drapatyi meets most of the requirements for this position, he said, pointing to his authority and his experience. But we'll give the last word to a skeptic. Slow journalism means resisting the easy story. The analyst Ivan Kevliuk warned against treating structure as salvation. The real challenge, he said, is human. The main problem is to get commanders to change their management style. And that's the thing about culture. It changes slowly, even under a leader the troops love. One general cannot rewrite an institution overnight, least of all while holding a 1,000-kilometer front. So we come back to our question: can one commander change a war? Here's how we'll judge it. Watch 3 things in the months ahead. First, his people, who he promotes and who he removes. He already has a new chief of the general staff at his side. Second, his resources, how he divides scarce troops and scarce drones between attack and defense. And third, the corps reform. Finish it well and the whole front steadies. Let it fail and the old problems deepen. We won't judge Mykhailo Drapatyi by his slogans. We'll judge him by outcomes. Because in the end, this appointment is a bet. A bet that Ukraine can adapt faster than Russia can adjust. Drapatyi, the Flying BMP, is the face of that bet. Now he has to prove it was the right one. That's it for this episode of the Veritas Brief. If this helped you understand the war a little better, do 2 things. Share it with someone who'd value it, and sign up for free at veritaseuropea.eu. So the next one finds you first. We read everything, we rush nothing, and we'll see you next time.